Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment to the agenda to, under E, unfinished business, to put number 2 to number 1 and number 1 to number 2, if I could, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
No, Mr. Mayor.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr.
Second.
Mayor. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And council, we have minutes from the regular council meeting, 7 p.m. on February 22nd. A motion to adopt those minutes would be in order.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? For no more than 3 minutes each can be accommodated. And I believe, please come forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Frank Crooks. I live at 3035 Stockton in Port Alberni.
Welcome, Frank.
On February 20th, my wife drove me to the hospital. I went in for a gallbladder operation. It was an emergency procedure. It took longer, and it was a very large incision. But that's not why I'm here. I talk about what happened after the surgery, where I was moved 5 times in 4 days, where the nurses did that the very best that they could with the circumstances they were in, but the conditions, where I actually went to a room for 2 nights, but then I was actually moved again to what I call a cattle stall, where you're only separated from your neighbor by a curtain, where there's no place for personal belongings. There's no privacy. It was just, when I came out of the ICU, actually went into, I wouldn't call it a room, I would call it an alcove, where, I was this close to the wall, and I was taken back by the conditions that I was in. And so I'm here tonight to ask the council to write a letter to VHA to express that we need more beds in rooms in the hospital. That the people that have worked in this valley, like myself, I am a 50-year taxpayer, along with all the people that worked in the mills down there for all this time, and now, after what I think is trying to contribute to the community and be a volunteer in a lot of cases, and this is what I get in return. So all I'm asking is you write a letter, express as a representative of the people of the community, saying we need more beds, and beds in rooms where, can you imagine asking for privacy in a day like this? A day, a little bit of, where a washroom is close by. I got a big incision. I'm going to try and do a 100-yard dash when I got with an incision like that, where there's not a washroom that's close by, don't have privacy. We have to do better than this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crooks. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tragic story, but I'd like to make the motion that we concur with Mr. Crooks' request to forward his concerns to the hospital.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, it's not the only patient that I've been hearing, especially lately with the flu going around, and everybody's been very ill. I heard a few worse stories. Unfortunately, with Island Health, it's every hospital. But like I said, I would encourage council to at least send a letter of concern. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Paulson?
Just to add to that, the letter to VHA, which I think is great, but I think we should also send a letter to Victoria, to the ministry. And in the letter, I would like to ask for a response on this particular incident, and maybe an explanation from VHA, so that we kind of build our case.
Councillor McClement?
Yeah, thank you very much again. Mr. Clark did hear you at the ACRD, but we've had this discussion with VHA, and they don't listen too well, and the government doesn't listen too well unless we make a lot of noise. And there was a time when we had a lot of beds taken out of the hospital with a lot of protesting, and some hospital staff were very helpful in informing us when things were going, and were able to stop a lot of things. But the beds, we kind of got open, but we didn't get a room to put them in, and they kind of ended up in closets and things like that. So if you're willing to have your name attached to some complaining, I'll give you a hand. I had mine out there for a long time.
Mr. Crooks, thank you very much for sharing this with us, and we'll definitely see what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishes to?
We have a motion on the floor, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry. On the motion to send off the letter, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Is there anybody else wishes to address council? Okay. Then moving on, delegations. We have Dr. Hasselbeck from Island Health. Welcome, Dr. Hasselbeck. You can help with the messaging.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. One of the great things is I am your medical health officer. I get a paycheck given to me by Island Health, but I actually work for you.
Okay.
So I don't mind carrying that message forward, and I'm sure Ms. Reardon and Dr. Johnson actually wouldn't mind coming and having a conversation with you. So I'd actually encourage you to have that conversation.
We will do that.
As one of the councillors mentioned, I think that every facility on the island right now is running substantively over what their bed allocations are, and it is sometimes what we refer to as the winter surge, often driven by influenza. So there's a whole bunch of other things that are associated with vaccinations, and we could keep going, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about this evening, if that's okay.
All right.
As I try to come around to councils each year to report out on the health status of the population, one of the things that has come back to me repeatedly in the last few years is we'd like to hear a little bit more about what's going on with substance use. Certainly the last year relative to illicit drugs has caused a fair bit of angst. And the other topic being mental health, so perhaps that might be in a future year. Just to give you a quick outline here, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about alcohol, illicit drugs, some marijuana, some prescription drug issues, and certainly some issues on the limited treatment options that are available and the roles local government can play. This kind of wiggly graph has a hump in the center of it, which is about 2008 and 2009, which was the maximum years where we saw alcohol consumption occurring. The red line is Canada, and it had gradually been increasing until about 2 or 3 years ago when it began decreasing. BC, which is both in the yellow and blue, and let's just look at the yellow line, kind of reached a peak, and many of us will recall the days when they brought in the drinking and driving laws, and all of a sudden alcohol consumption dropped off in the province substantively. Regrettably, the last few years have seen a real resurgence in alcohol consumption in the province, and I'm actually going to look at that more carefully because we can look at what's happening in the Alberni Valley as a total, of which Port Alberni still constitutes about 75% of the population. The red line is alcohol consumption in absolute liters of alcohol per adult per year. There's approximately 58 standard drinks in 1 liter of alcohol. So if you work that out, works out for every one of us about 2 drinks a day. Okay, and that is what we on average are drinking at this point. And as you can see in this graph, both the red and the blue are continuing to trend upwards. The blue being Vancouver Island, red being Alberni Valley in terms of overall alcohol consumption. And that is actually leading us to some challenges. In comparison to the rest of the island, not the highest on the island, but it certainly does have a higher rate of general overall consumption of alcohol. That converts to, if we're looking at mortality associated with alcohol, to the highest component, highest rate of alcohol-related mortality on the island. Good portion of that will actually be driven by motor vehicle crashes that are associated with alcohol as well. The second issue I wanted to flag for you, there's been a lot of attention across the country in terms of increased illicit drug overdoses. Unfortunately, on the island, we have seen more than our fair share. Again, if you look at blue, you're going to see BC. If you look at red, you're going to see the island. That has continued to increase since about 2010. In December of 2015, we had our highest ever recorded month, only to be eclipsed again in January 2016, and that continues to increase. We've had about 30 plus deaths so far already this year. That's about 50% of what we would normally expect in a year. So 2016 is going to be an exceptionally tragic year. While illicit drugs get a great deal of the attention, this is just trying to compare hospitalization mortality for both tobacco, alcohol, and illicit drugs. Tobacco still leads those in general, with one thing I'm going to point out to you, alcohol being second. Illicit drugs are still much further back. So when we're talking substances, we need to be talking all three in the same breath. What we can, if we try to make comparisons here, and these start getting pretty complex, but I do want you to have the information if you wish to use them, is that tobacco continues to trend downwards, has been for almost 50 years now. Alcohol is doing the reverse. And if we look at something like hospitalization data, what we've actually seen on the island, which is where the blue arrow is, hospitalization is now more common for alcohol-related issues than for tobacco. And that also crossed over for the Alberni Valley in about 2011. We expect that will happen for the whole of BC sometime in the next year. I do have Alberni specific information on drug overdoses. Unfortunately, the numbers are actually fairly small, so I wouldn't encourage you to look at these specifically. Just as I approach the end here, I wanted to flag to you that we're certainly seeing a change in street environment when it comes to illicit drugs. A great deal of attention to fentanyl. While that has been the attention, I'm not sure that should be the only attention that we have. It's comparable to heroin and morphine and codeine and other opiates, maybe a little bit longer lasting. One of the myths that I need to correct is that this is not coming from the medical diversion or prescription drugs. This is being imported from offshore. And because it is more potent or higher concentration, it allows for smaller weights to be smuggled into the country, tougher to catch at the border. It's actually cheaper. And now we're starting to see fentanyl get incorporated in with a whole variety of other drugs. This has caused a great deal of problem. Fortunately, not yet in the Alberni Valley, but I expect that we will see much more of that as we go forward. I know this council has grappled already with some of the zoning issues associated with marijuana. I'm not going to spend too much time with you. We did provide some commentary, and I'd actually encourage you to continue that discussion, because I think there are some things within your bylaw that you might want to continue to look at as the regulatory environment continues to change. There isn't a lot of proven benefit in marijuana, but the risk benefit is at least comparable to alcohol. It might even be safer than alcohol, and I put a big might there. And say, I know these are issues that you've already grappled with. The final quick one I wanted to mention to you, we're seeing an increasing rate of prescription drug overdoses. These aren't people necessarily misusing those prescriptions. What it is an aging population, often males who have had chronic pain for some time, who just as they get older are not needing as much of the opiate but aren't having their prescriptions adjusted, and we've seen more and more overdoses showing up in emergency rooms. What we need to do for both the prescription drug as well as the illicit drugs often relates to the distribution of naloxone, which has received a great deal of attention again in the media recently. But the naloxone only works if somebody is there to administer it, and is only one piece of a much longer continuum of services of which I've identified up there, and happy to have more conversation. The one that might be of note to this particular council is the need for detox sobering up beds, of which we don't have any here in the valley, but hopefully we will see some in the near future. Housing is one other thing council has a significant impact on. There is a housing plan that is out there for greater discussion. I certainly encourage council to seek out and support that diversity of housing that's necessary. It is a very good solution for substance use issues. And council can advocate, as you have just been able to demonstrate, one of which might be for those increased services. One of the other things I flag in there is the municipal alcohol policies. I know some of our neighboring communities have actually begun that process. If Port Alberni was interested, I'd be quite happy to have the discussions. You can find more at that particular link. And as I close off here, the important message for council is that you can actually do something. You can reduce accessibility. You can make things worse by increasing accessibility. You've already had some of the marijuana discussions, and in doing so, you're beginning to set policy for the community. And we are into problematic issues associated with illicit substances that we've never seen the likes of in the past, and I expect we're going to need more conversation. So with that, Your Worship, members of council, thank you for your time and appreciate opportunity to answer any of your questions.
All right, Councillor Paulson.
Dr. Hasselbeck, thank you very much. That's great information. I'm just kind of curious in our own situation here, and I don't know if this is unique to our community or not, but on Highway 4, for the summertime traffic, we actually probably have well over 1 million people go through that way. And I know that people traveling on holidays tend to stop and stock up. And I'm just wondering if there's a chance that that particular type of traffic might be skewing the figures for Port Alberni a little bit. I know that people do this on purpose, stop in Port Alberni, because it is cheaper than Tofino and Ucluelet. And anybody who goes out there on an annual basis, I'm sure, is aware, and they use us as a shopping center and a stopping off point. Just wondering about your opinion on that.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson. The alcohol consumption data are based upon location of sale. So someone who is purchasing in the valley, which includes the West Coast, that will be attributed to the Alberni Valley. Likewise, if somebody here goes and purchases in Nanaimo, it'll get attributed to Nanaimo. It is not a bad estimate. What I would encourage you to look at, though, is the alcohol-related mortality, which is based upon residence of the individual, not where the event occurred. So when you're looking at alcohol-related mortality, which is as high as it is, it probably is a better indicator that alcohol consumption is also continuing to rise.
Thank you. Councillor Sylvie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to emphasize about the issue about fentanyl being associated to narcotics, and it's becoming a big issue, especially in our region within the past year or two. Do you have any related stats as into findings in certain areas, especially Port Alberni and the Valley, on the issue of fentanyl?
Thank you, Councillor Sauvé. And we actually haven't seen the same level of activity. What we have seen, and particularly able to track back, one is Nanaimo specifically was faced with a much higher incidence of fentanyl-related issues beginning about 3 years ago. So while everyone else was talking about it, we saw that product showing up in the Nanaimo area. On December 20th, we saw a new product, a fentanyl-related substance. It came in Victoria, made its way up. As it gets further out, what tends to happen is it seems to get cut down a little bit more. Each distributor sort of skims the top quite literally. Okay. That makes it more dilute. That may make it a bit safer. So we're not seeing the same level of tragic outcomes in the valley that we have seen in other places on the island, specifically Nanaimo and Victoria. Other places are similar to the Alberni Valley. There was at least one day where I know that we saw a spike in overdose emergency room visits here, probably related to some of that product coming into the valley. So the fact that we're actually able to trace that might provide some reassurance. The fact that we haven't seen the fatalities that other communities have is also reassuring.
Okay, and I just had two more, if patient with me. Now, marijuana falls under the illicit drugs as into your stats, if I'm right?
Sorry, it does not when it comes to illicit drug
Okay.
overdoses. It's been extracted out.
Okay. And I was concerned with the comment that you made that narcotics or marijuana is safer than alcohol. Can you explain that?
What I was alluding to is the risk benefit. Alcohol is a legalized substance for which we're looking at fairly high rates of hospitalization and mortality. Marijuana currently is not a legal substance, but that the outcomes we may be looking at might be comparable in a same regulated environment. So I don't want to suggest that alcohol is safe. Matter of fact, that's part of my message to you is let's remember that it's not safe. But we are likely to move into a marijuana environment that is decriminalized, at least, and how it's going to get regulated, I think, is a question for all of us. So I don't want to suggest...
No, but just the medical terms itself saying
you've got to
that.
be looking at both and sort of saying, yeah, we might as well treat both similarly, at
Okay.
least.
And the fact also, is there a reasoning with Island Health that you may know of? Because there's not or any doctors in our valley that I know of that prescribes medical marijuana. Is there a reason for that? Has Island Health sent out a special MOU with certain cities or any sort of things, or is it just to the discretion of the doctors?
I would say the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia have actually issued that dictum to all physicians in the province. It's not valley specific.
Okay, so they issued an actual fact not to prescribe?
It's a fairly strongly worded directive in terms of what my colleagues are grappling with. That doesn't require them, but it's not it's not something that's being encouraged at this point in time.
Okay, to all the physicians know that. And that might be relating maybe due to the fact that Health Canada is not involved, or?
This really comes down to what I wanted to stress before is don't assume that marijuana is an innocuous substance. It, one, does not have a lot of proven health benefits. So why would we be prescribing something that doesn't have those proven benefits? I know it has a lot that people associate with that they see as beneficial when it comes to self-medication components, but not from a scientifically proven medical component. And that's, I think, where the challenge exists for the physicians who are perhaps being asked to prescribe it.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Alberni, then Councillor McLennan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. Very interesting. My question, I guess, is around, I'm just wondering around the fentanyl use, if you're seeing any kind of a change in the age distribution of people who are dying or who are, severely affected by it. Are you seeing any difference in age or socioeconomic type thing from fentanyl versus other things?
Thanks, Councillor. And what we do know is about 3/4 of our fatalities are male. They're evenly distributed between the ages of 20 and 60. It's pretty tough to actually say it's belonging to any one particular group. As I had a similar question from Nanaimo Council earlier, that people may start their addiction journey from any of the socioeconomic strata. Once they become habituated to the drugs, they tend to use most of the resources in support of their addiction. And therefore, if we look at them close to their terminal event, they're going to be perceived as being in a lower socioeconomic group. You have to take that back. We actually don't know an awful lot about the birthplace or those social conditions. But what I did want to stress is it tends to be habituated users. Not many in the early 20s or sort of the recreational experimenting group, but when those cases have occurred, they have garnished a fair bit of publicity because these are individuals who are not yet habituated and aren't familiar with the drugs that they're using.
Councillor McLennan?
Yeah, I was noticing on your slides and that tobacco seemed to be the big killer, the big problem to the medical. And I was just wondering if you've seen any, I didn't compare your tobacco to your alcohol and that in your consumption. Have you seen any reduction in the problems with all these new rules that people can't smoke within 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet of whatever? And no smoking, I think we're trying to put no smoking in any park or anything. So has that been any help, or is that just incidental?
Thanks, Councillor McLennan. And yeah, it has been. As I say, we've seen a very consistent, steady, long downward trend in tobacco use and in policies that support individuals in staying tobacco-free, as well as policies that provide a good, strong community demonstration that tobacco isn't an accepted component, have been shown to be effective and continue to be. And I'd encourage you to go ahead with implementation of such an approach.
Okay. And the only other question, I guess, is about the same idea. Now that we're getting less restrictions on alcohol, is that creating a problem, or are people just becoming more responsible? I didn't notice a great big spike in that. What would you consider a fair alcohol level or whatever for a town?
Thanks, Councillor. And I'm not sure that I could give you a fair level. I think what we need to recognize is these are all substances that are problematic and need to have some comparability in terms of their regulation. You are absolutely correct that about a year and a half ago, we had the release provincially of a report on alcohol in this province. There was a series of recommendations. The intent of that report was to, let's modernize some components which seem to be somewhat antiquated, but we have to balance that off with reductions. What we have seen is predominantly implementation of those recommendations that have increased access or increased availability, but we haven't seen the implementation of the counterbalancing recommendations that we're supposed to protect against negative consequences. And that may well be contributing to why we've seen an increase in the last couple of years.
Dr. Hasselbeck, thank you very much for your presentation and continuing to attempt to educate council. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and look forward to seeing you next year.
All right, thank you. Council, we have our next delegation is the North Island Students Union. Jessica Sandy, Executive Director, and our familiar face, Wendy Kerr, Port Alberni Representative, to present the Canadian Federation of Students BC's Don't Close the Doors campaign. Welcome.
Thank you. Stand a little closer. Good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. We're here to talk about our campaign to reinstate the funding for adult basic education in the province. As you said, my name is Jessica Sandy. I work with North Island Students Union. And
I'm Wendy Kerr, and I'm currently a student at North Island College.
So, we're not even up yet. Getting there. One more slide. There we go. So adult basic education is a generic term that encompasses three main categories of students. These include students who need to complete their high school studies, students who need to upgrade their high school courses. They may have their programs that they want to enter for post-secondary may require a higher level of science or math than they completed initially when they went through high school, or students who perhaps didn't go to post-secondary immediately after high school, and the sciences, tend to almost expire. They have to update them. They haven't done it in 10 years perhaps, but they want to go into nursing or something. And lastly, those students who are seeking to improve their basic literacy or numeracy skills. So this also includes students with developmental disabilities that are enrolled in adult special education programs, such as English and English as a second language students.
Statistics from the Ministry of Advanced Education reveal that students in adult basic education programming are some of our most marginalized community members. They are women, Indigenous people, and parents. Over half are employed while in studies. The majority have already graduated and will continue on to post-secondary education after they've finished adult basic education. Many of North Island College students begin as upgrading students.
So back in 1998, all adult basic education was free. Then, in 2002, the provincial government mandated that adult learners who had already completed a high school diploma would be charged tuition fees in adult basic education programs. 5 years later, in 2007, the provincial government abolished tuition fees on all adult upgrading courses in both the K-12 and the post-secondary system.
Then Minister of Advanced Education Murray Cole explained that we are helping people upgrade their education so they can take advantage of our growing economy and enjoy rewarding careers by offering free tuition for adult basic education, whether students have graduated from high school or not. The government recognized the important role that education plays in preparing community members to meaningfully participate in our society.
In December 2014, however, the provincial government cut $6.9 million of funding and announced that in the absence of this government funding, institutions would be permitted to charge tuition fees on previously cost-free adult basic education courses. This meant that as of January 1st, 2015, institutions would be able to charge up to $1,600 per semester for adult programming. At North Island College, adult learners are charged $110 per credit, so some courses, the fundamental ones, are only 1 credit. Some of the higher level adult upgrading courses are 2 or 3, so you're looking at $330 per course for some of these adult upgrading courses. As of May 1st last year, the government stopped funding the school districts for tuition-free upgrading courses if the student had already held a high school diploma. There was an increase in funding to the grants program, but the bottom line is that the grants just serve as an unnecessary barrier to these students and cost the institution more money and staffing time by trying to assist with the grant application process.
The adult upgrading grants assist students with general costs relating to attending post-secondary, such as tuition, textbooks, supplies, childcare, and transportation. However, the threshold for qualifying for a grant is so low that many do not receive assistance. If someone makes more than $11.40 per hour, they do not qualify. There is a window of 10% more than the threshold where students may have up to 50% of only their tuition fees covered.
The reality is, though, no reasonable justification has ever been made for the reversal of this policy. At the time of the funding cut announcement in 2014, the Minister of Education, Peter Fassbender, stated his belief that adults who had already graduated should contribute to the cost of upgrading. What has changed? This is the same government where Murray Cole had identified the importance of upgrading back in 2007, yet Peter Fassbender's comments are completely opposite to Cole's statements, and it also goes against the government's own Campus 2020 study that identified the benefit to the province of free adult upgrading. At North Island College, we've seen a 20% drop in enrollment for adult upgrading courses this year as a result of this funding cut, which translates to 4% of our overall student population.
Student unions around the province have worked together to create a campaign to support adult basic education entitled "Don't Close the Doors."
The campaign aims to restore funding to adult basic education programs and eliminate tuition fees on those programs. It uses online platforms to engage members and put pressure on the government, and includes organizations signing on as coalition members. Here you see an example of one of the social media shareables that we created, and the students or former students featured in these images were all people that we found via their interactions with the campaign online. As we were working on the campaign, people kept coming forward with stories of how adult upgrading programs positively influenced their life and gotten them on track. It really reinforced to us the importance of this point of access to education for our community members.
Coalition partners on the campaign include the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, First Call, the BC Child and Youth Advocacy Coalition. the Federation of Post-Secondary Educators, the British Columbia Teachers Federation, and the advocacy group Protect Public Education Now.
In recent months, representatives from student unions around the province have been presenting to city councils, and so far, the City of Victoria, the City of Burnaby, the City of Duncan, the City of Parksville, and the City of New Westminster have all voted unanimously to endorse our campaign and restore funding to adult upgrading programming. I will add that the Village of Cumberland is voting tonight on this. We presented to them in the middle of February, and they're voting on the motion, but I don't know what's happening right now. They're meeting as we speak. So there are a number of ways in which the Port Alberni City Council could assist in this campaign and support our community members here in the Valley. We've submitted a draft motion for your consideration. We're hoping that you are able to write this letter to ask for the funding to be reinstated for the adult upgrading programming. If this happens, we would be happy to put the logo of the city on the website, don'tclosethedoors.ca, alongside of all of the other cities who have endorsed and supported this movement. And we're hopeful that that is the case. That's why we're here. But thank you very much for your time and allowing us to present this evening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councillor Sauvé?
I'm just prepared to make the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Good timing. 10 minutes just in. So, as you probably know, the School District 70 used to offer ABE through the high school, and they dropped that when the provincial government Ministry of Education decided they would no longer fund that as a separate course. But they also, students who were certificated with the ABE have found that it didn't lead necessarily to further jobs or further certification or what have you. Have things changed for the students now if they get an ABE designation?
So what the ABE helps them, it's a point of access for post-secondary. So, getting into trades or healthcare professions and stuff like that, they need those, science courses, math courses, English courses in order to get into that post-secondary education that's going to get them those better jobs. And so it's not necessarily that having the high school diploma will set them ahead, but they need that basic level of education in order to enter college and do those programs.
Okay, so it has validity.
It does, yeah. So it's free, but many of them go directly into North Island because they're already comfortable in the space, right? And yeah, it's meant as a point of access for further education, and the institutions are getting funding in that way from them for the down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Council? So, Councillor Sauvé?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council in the city of Port Alberni write to the Minister of Advanced Education supporting adult basic education and requesting funding be reinstated for adult basic education programs.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor McClement?
Yeah, I think a letter is about the minimum we could do, and we do already have Councillor Sauvé again to this Facebook business, and he can probably send some of that around for us as well. I noticed that's one of the things you asked for on, and some of us aren't quite as high tech as others.
I know, you got an iPad there.
And Wendy, it's good you're going back to school. What are you going to be when you get out? But you can tell me
I'm
that.
not sure what I'm going to do when I
Little
grow
older?
up quite yet.
Okay.
Maybe go back to school again.
Councillor Alamani?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seeing as I work at VIU, I've seen the effect of this change, not only just in general, but even in the classroom. You just see less people showing up that you might see of certain demographics. So it has had a profound effect, I think, and it's going to continue having an effect. So I'm glad to see that you've come to council, and I'll certainly be happy to support the motion.
Okay, thank you. So, on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay. Am I allowed to shake your hands really quickly?
I'm sorry?
Shake your hands really quickly to thank you.
Of course.
Autographs too.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Wendy, thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
All right, and council, our next delegation is to do with the Heritage Fair. And Pam Craig. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And councillors, thank you for giving me this opportunity this evening to give you a little bit of information around the Heritage Fair. And I just want to take a few seconds to a bit of an aside. Last evening we had a very special event at the Paramount Theatre, reinstating the Film Fest. And we had a full house. It was amazing, people coming out, presented by the Alberni Valley Museum. Quite surprised, but it was an excellent film, which was in the Academy of Awards system this year, Brooklyn. So our next one is April the 10th. So we're looking forward to a good group for the Woman in the Band. So keep your eyes and ears open for those events. And I first of all would like to thank Councillor Sauvé and Councillor McMillan for consenting to be a judge at our Heritage Fair this year. This year is our 14th year, and we have a very hard-working committee that puts all the plans together, and those members are Pat Dahlquist, Marta Williamson, David Hooper, myself, Tom Hall, Shelley Harding, and Kirsten Smith. So we work very hard to get ourselves ready to go, and the fair is always the first weekend in May, so that's May 6th, the Friday, and May 7th, the Saturday. Now, Port Alberni is the home to the Regional Heritage Fair for Vancouver Island North, and we host students from Ladysmith through to Port Hardy. And over the last 13 years, we have hosted 13,000 students in a sense, because that's the number that has worked within their classrooms to produce projects for the Heritage Fair. And out of that, 1,600 have attended the Heritage Fair here in Port Alberni. And the program is designed to create and strengthen young people's knowledge of the diversity and uniqueness of Canadian heritage, providing young people with the opportunity to develop strong roots in their community and culture will give them the confidence to fully share an active citizen in the shaping of Canada's future. And we're also fortunate because our local education curator, Shelley Harding, is a member of the board of directors for the BC Heritage Society. So that gives us a connection and a good person to relay all the necessary information back and forth. So I've prepared a few slides tonight just to give you some idea of the things that happen there and the wonderful young people that we do have coming to our fair. And our first slide. Very good. Clicked it correctly. This young student, Myra from Nanaimo, presented Women and the Vote, the suffragette movement. Notice that Myra attended with the period costume and a very wonderful display. This one was Mr. Dress-Up. All kinds and manners of different types of presentations from students, and also complete with Casey and Finnegan. This young student also accompanied her presentation by playing the guitar. Very innovative students come along to this event. And this is an example of a couple of our judges, Bill Lekich and Mayor Rattan. We're volunteers to judge our students. We have 120 students that need to be judged on that day, and over 75 volunteers from the community to make this event happen. And during that time, the students participate in workshops. This one is with the puppets from McLean Mill. You notice that you've probably seen them out at the mill. This is one of the favorites of all the students, and they enjoy it, and we're going to be doing this one again this year. And this young fellow is in the artifacts workshop. His name is Tim Masso from Ucluelet, a very wonderful young man. You notice the white gloves? All the students get to try on the gloves and touch the artifacts, actual artifacts from the museum. And Tim is looking at an old toaster. That doesn't look that old to me, but anyway. Tim was chosen to attend the provincial fair. He was chosen to carry the talking stick in the closing ceremonies. And Tim was an amazing ambassador for our region, and he's very proud of his heritage. There, oops, I'll go back one. This group is, of course, the Industrial Heritage Group. They come along and volunteer and provide a hands-on workshop for students. Notice the crosscut saw was very popular with students, and they all had a chance to give that a try. And this young student experiencing the proper way to swing a sledgehammer. Amazing, they enjoyed that. And this is an example of the groups that their students are divided into. Notice they have a group leader that makes sure they get to each workshop on time, and especially getting to get their projects judged, so they're prepared and ready to go for the next event. And off they go onto the train, out to the mill. I think they carry their lunches and have their lunch on the train, and once they get out to the mill, then they have other activities happening out there. And notice the VAST students and their teacher, Kama Money, on the train. They had a great time last year. And I think I have one of the students at the mill, yes, out in front of the mill itself, doing some exercise and talking about what goes on at the mill. Now, we do provide awards on the Saturday. There's an opportunity for students to come and have their awards presented. I'm sure that counselors will have received this little booklet. On page 10 and 11 is the list of all the different awards that are available from provincial, national, corporate societies, local sponsors, and individuals. This happens to be myself. It was one that I chose quickly, and I have presented the Aesthetic Presentation Award and will continue with that award. Also a People's Choice Award and a Student's Choice Award. The sponsors are the Alberni Valley Lions and the Val Hughes Memorial Fund, Quality Foods, Alberni Valley News, Lady Bird Engravers, Port Alberni Parks and Recreation and Heritage, and of course the City of Port Alberni. And that's Don Hudson from the Lions at the award ceremony. And these are the students in Victoria getting ready for the provincial fair. 6 students are chosen to go down and participate at the provincial fair. And this is the student standing in front of the government house. Students get to have lunch at the Lieutenant Governor's residence in Victoria, a beautiful heritage building, and quite an interesting afternoon for students that attend the provincial. And there they are, over 100 students and their chaperones at the end of their week presenting their projects at the provincial fair. So I can answer any questions if you wish, and I look forward to hoping that some of you will be able to come out on the Saturday, May 7th, and talk to the students and have them present to you what they've learned.
Okay, Councillor Paulson.
How are you fixed for judges?
Oh, we can always use more judges.
I'm in.
Oh, you gotcha. Thank you. You'll get a phone call from Pat Dahlquist.
I'm sure I will. She might even knock on my door.
For sure.
All right.
Okay.
Pam, thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you very much.
presentation. Great pictures.
Thank you for helping us with the fair. It's just going to be a great fun. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, before we go on to the next item, I realize I neglected to do something at the beginning of the meeting, so I'm going to do it now. And that is, we have a next item for our grab and go bag, and it is water, one essential of life, along with oxygen. So tonight is our 4th installment of our initiative to build a personal emergency supply kit. As you will recall, Council, at the last meeting I added a waterproof flashlight. Tonight we're adding one of our most important items. Water is an essential element to survival and a necessary item in an emergency supplies kit. Following a disaster, clean drinking water may not be available. Your regular water source could be cut off or compromised through contamination. You can exist on very little food for a long time, but after a short time without adequate water, your body will not be able to function. Prepare yourself by building a supply of water that will meet your family's needs during an emergency. It is recommended that you have 4 liters per person per day for at least 3 days. So a family of 4 who wanted to keep 3 days of water on hand would need to store 48 liters. But there is more. Remember that water needs to be replaced periodically. It is recommended that sealed bottled water be replaced once a year, and water that you filled yourself be replaced every 6 months. As a reminder, this kit, together with a Briggs & Stratton generator from LB Woodchoppers, will be given away to one lucky person before the June Exercise Coastal Response event. To enter the contest, all you have to do is send a photo of yourself with your kit or grab-and-go bag and submit it through the ACRD contest form on their website. Here we go. We are building our kit as we go. I was suggesting that we use some activated carbon that's produced locally that we could use for our water filtration, but apparently it's not quite ready for that yet. All right, council, unfinished business. We have in part E, we had a slight change in the agenda. Councillor McClement, I believe we have a motion concerning mill board, the mill board. Am I?
Number 2 was moved to number 1, Mr. Mayor, and I'll make that motion first.
Okay.
I move that the Council of the City of Port Alberni appoint Bill Collette, Jan Lavertu, Sheena Faulkner, Ken Fife to the interim McLean Mill Management Board effective immediately. Susan Mayer Verda and Jamie Morton be appointed as voting advisors to the board. Councillor McClellan be appointed as council's liaison. And the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society be invited to appoint a liaison, and that expressions of interest be invited from the public for the 3 remaining positions at such times as the governance structure of the board in terms of reference are confirmed or other suitable time.
Any discussion, council? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And then from the Director of Community Services, the McLean Mill Management Board terms of reference. And that's from page 61. We have the report dated March 10th, outlining information to assist council in determining the reporting structure and actions required for creating the management board. Welcome, Director Kingston.
Thank you.
So you've done a lot of work in a short period of time. You didn't have much time to put this together, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Council, did you want to review what you've done, Director Kingston, for us?
Sure.
To walk us through it?
Sure. At the last meeting, the direction was to create a terms of reference for the new board that you've just appointed. And when I sat down with staff to create that terms of reference, there became a large number of questions. And so this report does not have a terms of reference to it. It outlines some of the issues and questions that council will need to address to come up with in terms of an appropriate structure for the management board. And there is a flow chart, a decision tree, the 3 main questions there, and I'm assuming that everyone's had a chance to look at it, so I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but just highlight that there was 3 particular questions in there. And so at the last meeting, I had given you a report that had a number of options of what the governance structure could look like, and there were some questions around that, but it appeared that at the meeting you were heading towards an internal management board, and then subsequent to the meeting I was told no, that it wasn't an internal management board, that it would be an independent board. So that's why you don't have a terms of reference in front of you. So the question that council needs to ask is this board directly reporting to the City of Port Alberni? And that's where the first red circle in there becomes the decision tree. If it is reporting directly to the City of Port Alberni, then it's an internal structure. If it's not reporting to the City of Port Alberni, has an arm's length relationship with the city, then you come to another question, is do you maintain the existing relationship that you have with the Industrial Heritage Society, or do you create a new structure or a new society? If you're deciding that that management board is going to reside within the city, you then go to the other side and you look at what is the structure within the city of Port Alberni. And so that from there then becomes some of the decisions and some of the actions, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that council may have.
Councillor McClellan?
Yeah, first of all, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the reception of the report.
Okay. Is there a seconder for
Second, Mr. Mayor.
the receipt of the report? And we have a seconder. Any discussion, council? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Teresa, for doing the report and giving me a preview of it the other day, which still a little bit of mud in my eye on the thing, but I've got it. I think we've about got things figured in some regards. And the questions that you've asked and say that we have to answer, I think some of them are very similar to each other, but at the same time, we've got to do some head knocking, I guess, to get the thing together. So, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion to put on the floor for debate, and I move that the City of Port Alberni authorize the management board that has just been appointed by the city to operate the McLean Mill and Train, to work with the city, that's staff and council, and the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society to form a legal entity to operate the mill and train, draw up terms of reference for the board's operation, i.e. a society or other system, work out how to liaison with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society in operation of the mill and train, and work out the interim operation and funding of the mill and train during the changeover period, and report back to council with a progress report at the next meeting of council. If there's a seconder, I'll speak that.
Okay. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Basically, we see some two separate ways up there that it is felt that we could go with a management board or an independent society. I'm not 100% sure we have to make a decision between the two. I think they can be one and the same. The independent society may be a little stretch out, but if it absolutely needs to be, let's do it. The people that are on the board definitely have to be involved in the discussion, and that's the reason for this motion, and to get on with the show. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. City Manager, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering if it's possible to have that motion up on the screen for council to look at. It's given that it's long. I don't know if we can do that. Can't do it, sorry. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I've got a copy of the motion in front of me. And I would ask that council choose the wording carefully of the motion. I think I understand the intent. It says that the City of Port Alberni move that the City of Port Alberni authorize a management board that has been appointed by the city to operate the McLean Mill and Train to work with city staff. I don't know that the council has empowered the new committee to operate the McLean Mill and Train. We have a contract with IHS to do that. So I would suggest that council be careful about the wording of the motion. I understand the intent, and I don't think the intent is offensive or shouldn't be offensive to the parties that currently are party to the agreement. So we should be careful that this motion doesn't get in the way of that good work.
I think, from my perspective, what we need here is an interim process, so that between where we are and where we want to get to, and the intent is that both continue to operate. That the Industrial Heritage Society continue to do what it needs to do, and it is the current legal entity that we work through, but at the same time we begin the process of moving to where we ultimately want to get to, which in Teresa's diagram, I believe is a contract with a new society. It's just a matter of how we get from where we are to where we want to be. So this is an interim process, or an interim situation. Councillor McClellan, am I correct? And that's the...
Yeah, we are right now in interim. We made a motion in December to accept the recommendation to form a board, the recommendation of the McLean Mill Advisory Committee. And at that meeting, there was members of the Industrial Heritage Society, City Council, and some others, and it was quite well debated and discussed, even with the power out. And that's what we came up to do. And then the recommended motion from staff on page 69 that I read out to form the board is what we've done. And therefore, now that we've passed that motion, these people have already previously agreed to do that. We're now, what are they going to do? Just having them there is not going to solve a problem. I believe this motion will solve it. If there's some things that have to change in it, the last line, report back to council, then at the next meeting of council, we can change it then if it's something not working. But for us to sit here right now and say, let's not do this, let's do that, it's been debated and I appreciate the work, by the way, of the McLean Mill Advisory Committee, everything that they've done, and went up and down and around in a lot of corners, but are now come to the conclusion that we can to keep the place going and to try, and the goal was initially to make it, I guess, more interesting, get more people there. The Industrial Heritage Society has done an excellent job over the last however many years it's been, 15, 20, and kept everything going for us. And it's a city's asset, and there should be a way of recognizing them and thanking them for what they've done. And then as we start this new way, and we've got now some more people involved, and if you've been out to the mill lately, you've seen the work done on the off-heritage site, and as you go into the entrance where the cafe used to be and isn't anymore, it's now a gift shop, and all the new things that are there. And once again, I'd like to just put a shout out to Home Hardware and Jan Lavertu and his crew that have volunteered and at no cost to the city have done all that work. So thank you, Jan, again. But you know, and I understand the I don't know what you call it, temporary city manager, anyway, Tim, his concerns, and I understand that we don't want to be stepping on anybody's toes, and that's why I feel that the 4 board members that are on it now, myself as representative council or whatever, and Industrial Heritage, get together, figure out what we can do, and if we can come up with something that we don't think is working, then we can come back to council for further direction.
Okay, I think I understand the intent of the motion, but I just want to make sure that we're not passing something that's going to bind us in a way that we don't want it to be, and that it's not as clear for staff as we want it to be. That would be my only concern. So Davina is the one that I would turn to if we've if we've not wordsmithed it correctly. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to, given that I'm temporary, I'm going to give a suggestion to Councillor McClellan on what I think is wording that will be very effective, and it's for him to move or not.
So okay, and then the suggestions, and I don't mind putting them out there, I don't know, I
Sure.
wouldn't mind it if he had said so, is to delete the words "to operate the mill and train" and take number 1 out, "to operate the mill and train." They were appointed by the city to do that, and otherwise, what job do they have? So I would recommend we leave it in for now, of just my suggestion, and if something is worded bad and needs to be rechanged, there's nothing saying we can't look at it, but unless we have a big debate in another committee, which I don't think I want to do, but you do have another councillor there wishing to talk.
Councillor Minions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the concern around the wording, although I read it the first time and thought it looked fine, but given that we do still have a contract with Industrial Heritage to operate the mill and train, and I was just curious if, I know at our personnel committee meeting, we talked about formally sitting down with Industrial Heritage, because a lot of these talks they've been included in, but we haven't actually sat down with them from the city in a formal capacity. So I'm just curious if that's been done yet, or if we're waiting on this to start that process.
Well, that hasn't been done yet, unfortunately. It was supposed to be done before today, but it seems that people couldn't get together. It's going to be done on Wednesday, I understand.
On Wednesday of this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't mind taking out this number 1, operate the mill and drain, because it's already in the, and take it out of there if that's a problem until after that meeting. And that would be a friendly amendment, and just leave it in the main body, because that's what we made the board for.
Okay. Councillor Sobey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Personally, I'm not ready to vote on this motion right now. I really want to hear and as to the Heritage Commission and their input in this matter. And the fact that they didn't have a meeting, there's something uneasy that doesn't make me feel comfortable. So I'm not going to be supporting this motion until there's, I agree with Councillor Millions that there needs to be more input sharing with the Heritage Commission. Thank you.
No, is that what you said?
Sort of.
All right.
Close enough, Sherry?
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add more to the fire, during our budget meeting today, we allocated funds to the Industrial Heritage Society with the intent of them running, I assumed running it for the 2016 season. So I'm just wondering if we follow Councillor McClemon's motion, then do we have to rehash all that we've done so far for the Industrial Heritage Society?
Yeah, of course. Please come forward.
We have this Wednesday meeting with all the parties involved, and also on the 22nd we have a Board of the Directors meeting to discuss all these. So maybe we should all wait until we've done that, get all our directors on side, we hash this out. We think it has to run within the society, our society, for this year at least. You haven't got time to get a new society up and running in time to run 2016 anyway. But we're happy with the people you've chosen the board, that's not the issue. But it still runs through the society at this point. And give us that 2 weeks, and we'll get back to you after that 22nd meeting. We'll let you know where we stand.
All right. Councillor Minions?
Thank you. And can I just confirm, I mean, you are already working with the people who have been appointed to the board and the committee as well. So they are involved at this point. You're working together.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. We don't have an issue with the people here. It's just the way we're going to settle up and which society is going to run it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just give money to 4 individuals.
No.
You're going to give it to a society or a corporation, right? So we have to have a society in place.
Right.
We're the only one in place.
We understand that.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we do it right and protect, the interests of the city and all of us, all of our directions going forward, and all of everybody's work for all these decades. So it's important we do it right.
There is another issue you should be aware of. Alberni Pacific Railway is a registered provincial railway owned by the society. We can't give it away. We can't give it to you as a city. So there's always going to be, it's not a simple thing to change over, but we will do it.
Yeah.
The will's there on both sides. We'll get it done.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McClellan, you have your hand up for a comment?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the intent of this motion is to get this thing working. And we didn't get the one meeting. We'll get it going. And I don't even have on my calendar what time our meeting is, but I'll find that out before I go home tonight.
So then are you wanting to amend your motion?
Well, to amend it to take the number 1 to operate, and you've got it in front of you, everyone has a copy of that. Take the number 1, operate the mill and train off, and carry on from there. And that's what, I understand that this may not happen this year. I'm hoping it will.
Yeah.
Because should have been doing this, in my opinion, in January, and now we're into almost April. And we want to do things that are going to be a benefit to the taxpayers, is what the entire, why you worked on getting the committees. And I always used to wonder who they were talking about with the mayor's committee, and I found out later it was this one, as you had instituted, and I thank you for doing that. So my impression is we should pass it without, just take out the first number 1, operate the mill and train, and the rest of it is right there.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
This is just comment, and, you know, I think a lot of this was hashed through in that meeting in December, and I think the important part is the first motion. There's a group of people that have been named and put together that can actually, I think, if they can be given marching orders to work towards the changeover and to the smooth conversion to where we want to wind up in the final day. But I think it's time for that group to let that group start to get to work. I think they're anxious, and it's taken a long time to get to this point today, so thank you.
And it does say during the changeover period, which, as you say, Councillor McClellan, could take quite some period of time.
If we wanted to even force it as a city council, and we don't, we'd have to give 3 months or 6 months notice or some such thing.
Notice on the
So it
contract.
isn't going to happen with, you know, it's going to be worked jointly this year at the minimum.
Right.
There's no question in my mind, and there was never any question in my mind when I wrote the motion. I just, hopefully the motion will be more clear and make it so that the board, now that we've got them, and we voted for that, you know, that they can do it. Otherwise, they'd have to wait for several weeks before they could do anything, and I don't think that's optimum for us at all, because fortunately for us, some of them are already working pretty hard on the volunteer side of it.
Okay. Anything else, Council? Then on the motion as amended, all those in favor of the amended motion? Opposed? Carried. Okay, from the city clerk, we have, whoops, we just covered that. Staff reports F. Accounts, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the certification of Director of Finance dated March 14, 2016 be received and checks numbered 134329 to 134524 inclusive in payments of accounts totaling $2,236,116.43 be approved.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And Alberni Harbor Key Lease, Unit Number 6, 5440 Argyle Street. Councillor Minions, are you prepared to make that motion?
That council for the city of Port Alberni authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a lease for unit number 6 at the Alberni Harbor Key with All Mexed Up Taco Shop, Judy Walker, for a 5-year term commencing February 1st, 2016 at the current monthly rent of $695.25 per month plus taxes.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm still voting yes no matter what on the last question. Have we, in the last while, ever done an assessment of these are fair rates for the businesses in Harbor Key?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. Perhaps city clerk
Can answer it another day even, because
Okay.
they've nobody noticed.
Okay. No, it hasn't been. It hasn't been done. Okay. Thank you. Lawn bowling club lease. Councillor Paulson, are you prepared to make that motion?
There we go. The council for the city of Port Alberni authorized the mayor and clerk to enter into a lease with the Lawn Bowling Club for a 5-year term commencing February 1st, 2016 for $1.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion, council? All those in favor? Carried. And from the city planner, the Advisory Planning Commission, summary of report, February 18th, 2016 meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission. Councillor Alamani, are you prepared to make that motion?
Yes, that the summary report of the February 18th, 2016 meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion? Councillor McClellan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, a question to the planner. Yeah, I'm wondering where we are. I noticed it was just debated a bit, I guess, at the last meeting or the one before that. Where are we with these so-called marijuana dispensaries?
Part of it was in my monthly report that's on the agenda. Further, we have issued the first business license application to one of the stores on 3rd Avenue. That affected several operations in the area with the 1,000-meter distance between units. So we have also begun enforcement action on those operations that it affected last week. So they've been informed in writing in that regard, and we're continuing to process other applications.
Thank you. Just a question. Have you measured for the 1,000 meters down the hill to the one that was thinking of opening up in the bottom of 3rd Avenue there?
So we have done the 1,000-meter radius, and like I said, we have informed the operations within that area. So some of them had applications in that they've been informed, those applications have been returned because they won't be successful. And there was a couple operations that had opened without applications that have also been informed.
I appreciate that. I hope we can keep it up and keep it to a minimum. Thank you.
Councillor Sobey?
Just a question, just to understand, if they still keep operating, we issue a $150 fine, am I right?
Then tickets would be the next step, yes.
Okay. Is there a next step after the tickets if they keep on paying their tickets? It's a very big growth, and they could afford $150 a day. What's the next step if we?
The next step would be for staff to come to council to get authorization for court action.
Thank you.
Councillor Alberni?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you refresh my memory how many are outside of the current limit now that that limit has been set? How many other ones are there? It changes often.
4 others that we have applications for.
Okay. City planner, on a different topic. I see a 60-lot subdivision up Bird Street. I see an apartment development, 4916 Athol, planned in the near future. And I also see that the Friendship Center has submitted new plans for a building permit. The groundbreaking ceremony is on Thursday of this week. So interesting times in the city of Port Alberni, more things happening as well.
Yeah, things that really, at the next planning commission, we have 3 development applications coming to this week's meeting. That one of them is the OCP and zoning amendment for that potential subdivision. So those will all be starting to come to council. And we have a number of projects that have been somewhat on the back burner or shelved that seem to be garnering new life, including the 4th and Athol apartment building that was destroyed by fire a number of years ago. Went through a significant process to get through rezonings and variances in order to potentially rebuild, then got shelved for a little bit and is now getting restarted. We're expecting them to formally take out their building permit and start construction in the next month, and that's 25 residential units.
That's great.
Yeah.
Shows confidence in their location and confidence in their city.
And like I said, there's other projects that are starting to call and run concepts by us, so it will be interesting to see if some of those come to fruition as well.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Council? Okay, on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Council, we have a status report. You've had an opportunity to have a look at it. Is there a motion to receive that?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor, to receive the status report.
Seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion, Council? Councillor Alberni?
Just wanted to bring up one with April coming up. I wanted to ask the city manager where we were with the fire bylaw for the backyard burning.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Alberni is correct that as of April 15th, there will be no more outdoor burning permitted other than campfires, as per our current outdoor burning bylaw. And then we have from April 15th until October 15th to get the bylaw revised so that as beginning October 15th, there will be no more permissible outdoor burning. So we don't have to have it done by April. We can't actually do it until after April 15th to revise that bylaw.
That's good, thanks.
So we have a month to burn our piles, is that what you're telling us?
I don't think that's what I said.
Okay, on the motion to receive the current status report, all those in favor? Carried. From the planning department, number of items in there as well. City planner, do you wish to highlight anything?
We've kind of already talked about the ones I plan to highlight,
Yes.
but I'd be more than happy to answer questions.
Well, we won't ask any questions about backyard burning, so anything else? Council? Okay, Councillor Alberni, would you like to make that motion?
I move that we receive the planning department's report.
Okay, seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And from the engineering department? City engineer, your department has been extremely busy. But
Yes.
fortunately, you've left enough streets open so that we can still get from one end of town to the other. Albeit it sometimes takes me an extra 10 minutes to get from home to City Hall.
I agree, Mr. Mayor. It has been a busy past few months on some of our major arterial roads. I agree.
Well, it's good to see. We know that, you're out there earning your money, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor McClellan, would you like to make the motion to receive this?
I move we receive the report from the city engineer and refer all questions to himself. Thank you.
Who's seconder? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, City Engineer. And we have our monthly report of the from the RCMP department. From the RCMP. Before we receive this report, however, Council, this is Inspector Richards' last report to Council. And before he presents his report, I have something to present to him. So I'm just going to speak here for a minute.
If you would like to say on this side.
Council, Inspector Richards has been here for, I believe it's 4 years now?
Coming up to 3.5.
Okay, well, close enough to 4 years. And he has provided incredible service to the city of Port Alberni during this time and great leadership to our RCMP detachment. However, either we have done something incredibly good or something incredibly terrible, because in order to get away from the city of Port Alberni, he is literally going to the opposite side of Canada. So our loss is Prince Edward Island's gain. Inspector Richards, all the best in Prince Edward Island.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. I said before, he's a police report for February. It's fairly typical. It's what's been seen in the past years as well as in the past number of months. Property crime continues to be probably one of our most pressing issues, specifically shoplifting as well as thefts of and from vehicles. February, the most significant file was actually the laying of charges in the 2012 homicide of Mervyn Hankins. This was literally thousands of hours dedicated to this file to bring it to this point where it is today.
As I said, and as the mayor alluded to, this is my last report before you, as my transfer will take place at the end of the month. I just wanted to thank council for the support you provided to the detachment and to myself. It really makes it easy to try and address issues with a unified approach. Support from council is a key component in this. The process to name my replacement is well underway, and until a successor is named, Staff Sergeant Paddock will be in charge of the detachment, as he has been in the past. It's a pretty light report for me this month. February was a short month, so our file's a little bit smaller, and that's it. If you have any questions, I'm glad to take those.
What's your takeaway from the city of Port Alberni that you're going to take with you to Prince Edward Island?
I guess it depends on which personal side. Of course, the beauty of the community, the people. Professionally, I think it really comes down to the people that I've worked with, both at the detachment and in the community. I've been fortunate enough to been posted to a number of places, worked with literally hundreds of different officers, different councils, and everyone, both my wife and I have come away, and we've never had a bad posting. Every place has some things that you remember. I still track detachments I was posted at online, reading the newspapers, so and those are from decades ago. So you always have a piece of you in the past, and bring those forward. So you alluded to the fact I'm going across the country, not all the way. There's one more province yet, but to me it's a good opportunity. I've always liked sort of that opportunity to move, as well as just within our organization. It provides an opportunity for different ideas from different areas to be brought to new communities, and maybe just a different way of looking at something that community hasn't thought of, or just a fresh set of eyes. So those are the things that I'll bring forward. Some of the things that we've done here. There's been some great programming that the detachment, I take no credit for that. That's the officers that came up with that. But I said, from the day I got here, I have no problems with stealing someone else's idea and tweaking it for the community. So again, I thank you for the support that you provided, and I said it was a great opportunity for us when we came here, and a great opportunity ahead of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Just want to thank you for your service from personal side of things, and I wish that our gift could have been a little larger in the form of a snowblower or a potato peeler, since you're going to PEI. So good luck and congratulations. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
So Inspector Richards, you know that the beach at Cavendish is red and or rusty color, and the beach is growing, which means that the land behind it is shrinking. So if you ever find that Prince Edward Island is getting too small for you, feel free to come back.
Oh.
And yes, thank you so much for your service to us, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, we're on to G, bylaws. Oops, I'm sorry. We need a motion to the monthly report.
Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared for the RCMP department that the monthly report from the RCMP providing information about current departmental operations be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, on to G, bylaws. First one is council procedures bylaw amendment. Councillor Washington, are you prepared to make this motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the Council Procedures Bylaw 2013 Amendment Number 2, Bylaw Number 4895, now finally be adopted, signed by the Mayor and Clerk, and sealed with the corporate seal and numbered 4895.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And from the City Clerk, the new revitalization tax exemption program bylaw for all commercial areas. City Clerk, could you please just do a quick review of what that revitalization tax exemption program bylaw is?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, at the last council meeting, council will recall that they did give direction to proceed with a new bylaw which would encompass all commercial areas of the city outside the uptown area. The bylaw is presented for 3 readings. Essentially, the highlights of this program are that projects must, at a minimum, have a building permit value of at least $100,000, must be located in the areas identified in Schedule B of the bylaw, which essentially is all our commercial areas. The maximum term of a tax exemption will be 5 years, and the amount of the exemption will be 100% of the increased assessed value and improvements on the property.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Minions, are you prepared to start this process?
That the report from the city clerk dated February 26, 2016 be received.
All those in favor? Carried.
That the City of Port Alberni Commercial Revitalization Tax Exemption Program bylaw number 4898 be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor?
Got some comments?
Oh, sorry.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate, incidentally, I'd like to just say thanks to, I guess it was Scott Smith's department that got these maps so we could actually read what street names were on it and not on these little screens where I was really straining. But I finally, I think, figured out where they all were. But the question I've got is, in a couple of these maps, like on the first one, there's some lots that are not colored in, so I'm presuming that they are residentially used right now in probably a majority commercial zone. And my question is, would it be in order to make an amendment that they be included if they were to be sold and brought into commercial use? Because this now, as we make this bylaw, that says what properties will be included, and to change it later would be difficult. So my question is, is it in order to make a motion that, an amendment that we include properties that are presently used as residential or maybe empty in this bylaw?
Sorry, City Planner, are you able to comment on that now? Thinking there may be some potential tax implications in that.
Well, of course, what lands are included are at council's discretion. Now, what's on these maps are what are currently zoned. So if they're not zoned commercial, now they may be residentially zoned in between commercial areas and may someday go commercial. And if you were to include them and they're zoned and used for residential, they wouldn't be, the way the bylaw is written, it wouldn't be applicable. They couldn't apply for, residential renovation and get a commercial tax revitalization bylaw. But you would be including, residentially zoned or other zones properties in the bylaw. So it's somewhat at council's discretion to direct us, and if we have specific ones in mind, then maybe we can look at them and consider them and ask council's opinion whether you think they're appropriate or not.
But the fact is, the ones that you've identified are the ones that are currently zoned commercial. Anything else is not currently zoned commercial.
Not currently zoned commercial.
And would have to go through a rezoning process in order to change that. Am I correct?
Yes, and I guess what Councilman Clement, I think, is maybe thinking is if they do get rezoned to commercial, you'd also have to amend this bylaw for them to qualify.
Right.
Which would be something, could be done at the time.
Right.
But it's up to council whether you want to kind of include them with the presumption that they might go commercial. I mean, it kind of depends which properties we might be talking about.
Right. Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, what the properties I'm specifically looking at is one of them on Johnson Road where the Hanson Hall is now. It's not zoned commercial, it's zoned for an organization or some similar thing. And here on the first page in 4th Avenue, there's 3 lots in between Argyle and Athol that aren't included, and it's sort of like in a commercial area. And those are the kind of things I was looking at. If it's not good to do it now, I'm not hung up. I just, we want to get this thing through. So,
Councillor Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm leaning towards not adding any more just for complexity's sake. But just working off of what the city planner just said, would we be able to include them in this bylaw at the time and at the same time as the rezoning, or would that have to be a separate process? Or could we make some sort of a policy whereby if there was a commercial rezoning that they would have the option of being included, or we would be able to include them into this bylaw?
You would have to do a separate process to amend this bylaw, and you'd want to at least get past the public hearing stage of a rezoning before you started to do that. But council could, on a commercial revitalization, once you're past that public hearing stage and you're supportive of that rezoning going forward, or final adoption is granted, that you could direct staff to begin the process to include that, to start that. I mean, amending this bylaw, doing small changes to the map is relatively quickly. It could be done in a couple meetings, where a zoning amendment is, a much different process, right? There's a much larger public process required for that. Council's not bound by any rezoning whatsoever. So it'd be something that, as a course of a commercial rezoning, it might be something that, we might want to consider once council's gone through the process and are prepared to support a potential rezoning to commercial.
Councillor Sobey? Okay. Okay, I certainly, from my perspective, city planner, let's do this the way it is set out now, and then if we need to rezone later on, go through that process later on. Otherwise we're unnecessarily complicating it.
Certainly at the discretion of council.
Right, I understand that. Okay, any other comment? On the motion to introduce and read it for the first time, all those in favor? Carried. Carry on.
That City of Port Alberni Commercial Revitalization Tax Exemption Program bylaw number 4898 be read a second time.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
That City of Port Alberni Commercial Revitalization Tax Exemption Program bylaw number 4898 be now read a third time.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. City Clerk, we have an amendment to the Schedule Revitalization Tax Exemption Program bylaw. Would you like to just give a brief overview, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have a current bylaw in place that covers the uptown area. And at the last council meeting, council did direct that we amend the schedule to that particular bylaw to include Harbour Quay properties, as well as city-owned properties that were previously excluded from the schedule of that bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Minions, you've done such a great job.
That the report from the City Clerk dated February 26, 2016 be received.
All those in favor? Carried.
That City of Port Alberni Revitalization Tax Exemption Program Amendment Number 1, bylaw number 4897 be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder? Second. All those in favor? Carried.
That City of Port Alberni Revitalization Tax Exemption Program Amendment Number 1, bylaw number 4897 be now read a second time.
Second. All those in favor? Carried.
That City of Port Alberni Revitalization Tax Exemption Program Amendment Number 1, bylaw number 4897 be read a third time.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. Okay, it's now 18 minutes to 9, and it's time for recess, so we'll call a 7-minute recess until 10 to 9. Okay, Council, welcome back. We are under Category H, Correspondence for Action, from the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society. We have a letter from March the 8th advising that their antique truck and steam show will take place in and around the Industrial Heritage Center at Rec Park on Labor Day weekend, September 3rd and 4th, 2016, and requesting the closure of Dunbar Street from the corner of 8th Avenue and 9th Avenue from 7 a.m. on Saturday until 5 p.m. on Sunday, September 4th. We need a motion. Councillor Sauve, are you prepared to make that motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that the letter dated March the 8th, 2016 from the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society be received and canceled for the City of Port Alberni. Endorse the closure of Dunbar Street from the corner of 8th Avenue east of 9th Avenue from 7 a.m. to Saturday, September the 3rd to 5 p.m. on Sunday, September the 4th for Antique Truck and Steam Show.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And from Angie Blake of the Port Alberni Folk Fest Multicultural Society, the Canada Day Parade, the annual parade. We have a letter requesting the use of city streets. Councillor Paulson, are you prepared to make that motion?
Sure. That the letter dated February 22nd, 2016 from the Port Alberni Multicultural Folk Fest Society requesting use of city streets on Friday, July the 1st, 2016 for the Canada Day Parade be received, and Council concur with the request subject to notification of emergency services, consultation with all affected businesses to minimize potential conflict and traffic concerns, and provision of standard liability insurance.
Seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And from the BC Community Forest Association, we have an email advising of their conference and annual general meeting. Councillor McClellan, are you prepared to make that motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion and then a little explanation. That the email dated March 3rd, 2016, advising the 2016 British Columbia Community Forest Association conference and annual general meeting is going to be held in Cowichan Lake from May 26, 28, 2016 be received, and councillors who wish to attend be authorized to do so. I have a seconder, I'll explain that.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
And during the budget discussion, this was discussed, and I asked Jake if he would reserve some rooms down there so that if a couple of councillors would like to go, and if not, if more than want to go, maybe some could go one day and some another and just use the room at a second night, or if not enough, we can easily cancel them at no cost. So it was no big deal. But my concept here was that it's on Vancouver Island. It's usually in the interior of British Columbia or Smithers or some faraway place. It's always at a small town where there is a community forest. And now my replacement, I guess, on the board of directors of community forest is from Lake Cowichan, so they've put a Vancouver Island rep on. So we're still represented. So those are the dates, and I believe there's 4 rooms reserved, so that we could be up to 4 people could go, and that's what I like to hear. How many like to go? Well, and I don't mind not if there's over 4 of the others do wish to, because I've been to them all. I'm not on the board anymore, and it'd be good for the councilors here to find out what community forests are doing and how they're doing it in other places as well.
And I'd like to attend, Councillor McClellan, but I can't attend all 3 days, but I'd certainly like to attend one. And I was looking at some of the offerings, and they all look good. So I wouldn't require a room to stay overnight, but I'd certainly like to attend.
Okay.
Councillor Paulson? Just from a purely educational point of view, with regards to community forests, I would like to attend as well.
Yep. So you get Jake to book you.
Is there anybody else wishes to attend or able to attend?
Well, Councillor Alberni.
I'm just looking at my calendar. Yeah, I think I'd like to go for the Friday at least, yeah.
All right, so we can get our names to Jake and carry
That's
through.
good. And if there's room, sure, I'll go, but I'd rather see all this the rest of you go and learn. And also, just before we vote on it, it's not something I gotta vote on, but just for information, the BC Community Forest Association is actually advertising the Vancouver Island Economic Development group is putting on workshops of some sort in several towns this week and next, and are going to come later on to Port Alberni to look at increasing the value-added sector of the forest industry. And that is something that the community forest has always supported, and in areas where there is a small value-added mill, they often will try and feed wood to it so that the employment can stay in the local area.
Okay, thank you. And on the motion, all those in favor? Carried. We have a number of letters, Council, in support of the Alberni Valley Museum from Shirley White, Diane Hoadley, and Donna Brett. Councillor Washington, do you want to make that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the letters in support of the Alberni Valley Museum from Shirley White, Diane Hoadley, and Donna Brett be received.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. We are under proclamations now. Seniors Week Organizing Committee. We have a letter looking to proclaim Seniors Week. And Councillor Sauvé, would you like to make that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the letter dated February 25th, 2016 from the Seniors Week Organizing Committee requesting that June the 1st to the 11th, 2016 be proclaimed as Seniors Week in Port Alberni be received and the week proclaimed as requested.
Your seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And City Clerk, we have some informational correspondence.
A number of items, Mr. Mayor. First is a letter from the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure providing an update on the expansion and enhancement of transit services. RCMP Pacific Region provides expenditures to January 31st. The Minister of Community, Sport and Cultural Development and Minister responsible for Translink provides an invitation to participate in one of 6 upcoming local government engagement sessions on the Climate Leadership Plan. I believe that was forwarded to Council. Parliamentary Secretary for the BC Jobs Plan encloses their 4-year progress update. The province advises that the provincial government is issuing a limited number of licenses for the sale of 100% BC wine on grocery store shelves. Minister of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations provides a copy of a letter to Scott Fraser, MLA, responding to the Mayor's letter regarding the issue of Manil's treaty impacts on Steelworkers Local 185 Franklin River crew. New Car Dealers Association of BC provides an email applauding the provincial government's announcement that will allow electric cars to drive in high occupancy vehicle lanes without having to meet occupancy requirements. The Alberni Social Planning Council provides their February 18th minutes. Minister of Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training and Minister responsible for Labour provides a copy of a letter to the UBCM providing an update regarding the ongoing arrivals of Syrian refugees into communities across BC.
Thank you. And Council, before we vote on receipt of these, anybody wish to extract anything, any of the letters? Councillor Alamani?
I did want to pull out one just from the first item there with the BC Transit. Just looking at the last sentence, it says this review will position the province, local governments, and contracted service providers to play their part in managing costs and optimizing revenues as local service priorities are considered. So, I don't know, that sounds to me like not the greatest stuff for BC Transit, but.
Okay, and Council, I'd like to point out the letter from the Minister of Forest, Lands and Natural Resource Operations. This has been a long-term saga of a number of years since 2011. Province has previously, on 2 previous occasions, successfully settled these treaties and compensated men who lost their jobs as a result of those, and it's done on a ratio. It's covered under Bill 28. There's no reason why they shouldn't carry on with past practice. I recognize that it will cost some significant amount of money in order to settle it, but that's what happens when you give away up to 100,000 cubic meters of wood that was previously logged by these men and as part of the treaty settlement. So I'm hoping for a successful conclusion to this as soon as possible, and it is good that the Minister Thompson is aware of the situation and has his staff working on it, and I hope it does come to a successful conclusion as soon as possible. Councillor Alberni, do you want to move receipt of these?
I move that we receive and file the reports. Correspondence.
Seconder?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. There is no report from in camera, which then brings us into council reports. Council, my report, I won't provide dates, but relatively recently I was at a nice tea meeting reviewing applications throughout the North Island for funding, and it's the same funding agency that has provided money for the expansion for the port, what we're calling the SOMAS lands that we've contributed to lately. Also on behalf of council, I attended a pickleball workshop at Alberni Elementary School, and approximately 30 people there learning pickleball skills. It's sweeping the Western world, apparently. It's
Only with old people, Mr. Mayor. Good
actually, you know, the man who was presenting was in incredible physical shape, and he had just been in a competition in Arizona, and he was beaten by a young guy who was 17 years old, so it's not just one particular demographic. I did a Shaw television interview about the city's partnership with Thunder in the Valley coming into the city for this summer. I was in Vancouver recently at the Small Business BC Awards at the Pan Pacific Hotel, and it is amazing the communities who have businesses represented there from all throughout the province. Hope to see businesses from Port Alberni represented next year. I was at Bob Daly Stadium as part of a walk for recognizing the challenges of depression, sometimes leading to suicide, and became incredibly aware of the great work that the CUAS Crisis Line is doing. Just recently, I was at the opening ceremonies for the BC Midget Hockey Provincials, which are going on now until March 16th at Weyerhaeuser Arena, and I provided the welcome there. So that was great to participate. And Council, that's my report. I move acceptance of it.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And from the regional district, Councillor McClellan, do you have a report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the most of the work in the regional district is being done on the budget, and they are going to have a public meeting Wednesday night starting at 6 p.m. And so if anyone's listening and has particularly city residents who we do pay a chunk of the budget of the regional district, so it's good to be there for that as well. And the people who live in the district can come, and usually there's not many people show, Mr. Mayor, and it would be good to have some input from the public at that meeting. And the other thing that happened, or motion that was passed at, or accepted, I guess, at the regional district was that Island Health, I guess, has come up with coming towards the end of March, and quite often you'll see money floating around coming, almost as it's coming off the back of a truck in some regards. So we just got this year $31,000 and change to do a study on the health of the area, and the money was referred to the Alberni Valley Health Network. So, and that's basically my report, Mr. Mayor. So I'll move that acceptance.
Is there a seconder?
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Carried. And councillors' reports, Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. February 24th, met with Travis Cross from the Port Alberni Professional Firefighters Union just to discuss happenings and what's going on at our local fire hall. Wednesday, March 2nd, Heritage Commission meeting. Highlights would be correspondence from the BC Arts Council suggesting the Heritage Commission play a more active role in determining museum exhibits and programs. Discussion about potential exhibits, 50th anniversary of the Regional District, 40th anniversary of Hyopiak School, New Channel Language, and CSHAT History. Led into a discussion about priorities for 2016. It was our first meeting since the Judy Rogers report was adopted by council, so discussion of what the Heritage Commission can do to work with city staff in developing alternative organizational models. Other suggestions revolved around promotions, making heritage relevant to the community. And finally, the AV Museum has reintroduced Film Fest, fundraiser for education programs, good pre-sales, and they have season and individual tickets available at the museum. Just for an update, there were 389 people at the first film March 13th, so up to the museum and get the brochure and buy your tickets there. And on March the 11th, I met with Stacy Watton, president of the local QP Local 118, along with two representatives from Vancouver to discuss the Judy Rogers report. And that's my report, sir.
Thank you. And Councillor Alberni?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two main ones, I guess, Air Quality Council meeting last week before. There's a big gap between our council meetings this week, kind of threw me off. But the Air Quality Council meeting, we actually had a good presentation from Dr. Hasselbeck from Island Health, talking about wood smoke in the valley and the health effects from that. Really good takeaway from that was something that he said about any unit that we can decrease wood smoke, particulate smoke, will lead to a direct unit of decrease of health impact. So I thought that was very interesting. And he had lots of good data like he did today. We also got a good presentation from Catalyst about their TDF, tire-derived fuel, and how they use that product. And then just some updates about wood burning, about the activated carbon. I'm trying to think of the name of the company.
Can Timber,
thank you. Can Timber Biotech down at Port Authority. The Ministry of Environment is putting in another monitor down there to keep tabs on any adverse air conditions that might come out of that. So that was good to hear. And any complaints or concerns from the public should go to the Port Authority, as they're the ones that have the certificate from the Ministry of Environment. So that's good for the public to know. And then we had food security climate change meeting on the same day. We also talked about Catalyst and about a bunch of other good stuff that you can see in the minutes. And that's all I got for today.
Thank you. Councillor Minions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a chamber board meeting. There was a lot of discussion around the drag races and just positivity about how the chamber can help to get the businesses involved in really embracing the event and having it in the center of our community. So I thought that was really good. We had a rebranding committee meeting. I attended the personnel committee meeting to discuss the McLean Mill board recommendations. We had a youth advisory committee meeting where we had a lot of really good discussion around what our direction is going to be moving forward in terms of projects. And we're working on planning an informal event to attract more youth to get involved in the group. I had a Rainbow Gardens board meeting as well. They were a bit concerned in hearing about the formation of the new seniors housing initiative because they just weren't really clear exactly what the role was going to be. So I think there's an opportunity there for us to consult them and potentially include them in the formation of that committee when it gets going. And I think that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson?
Well, you guys have all been really busy. On Saturday night, March the 12th, I was invited to be a guest speaker at the welcome banquet hosted by Alberni Valley Minor Hockey for the BC Midget Tier 4 tournament. I guess they wanted me to impart wisdom on my exposure to team sports from the time I was about 5 years old to the time to today. I won't say how old. There's 6 teams involved in that tournament. Burns Lake, Coquitlam Chiefs, Prince Rupert Seawolves, Surrey Thunder, Windermere Valley Rockets, and of course our local AV Midget Bulldogs. And like I say, feel free to go out and cheer them on. That tournament goes through Wednesday. And what a neat group of guys. It was a little bit of a shock when Prince Rupert Seawolves walked into the hall. They were a little bit late, but they're all white blonde. They dyed their hair white blonde, so it was kind of funny. And on March the 13th, I as well attended the opening ceremony, and Mayor Rattan gave welcoming remarks. MP Gord Johns gave welcoming remarks, and I was privileged to be asked, along with my long-term friend Tom McAvey, to drop the ceremonial puck to start the tournament. So it's great to see the youth involved, and it was kind of a fun weekend, and been watching the Bulldogs roller coaster story, but now we're moving on and getting ready for next year. Thank you.
Councillor Sobe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Short and sweet. March the 10th, met with Mr. Travis Cross with the Fire Department Union. I'm glad to hear that the Home and Garden Show this past weekend was very well attended, and I would have liked to see more about the garden aspect of it, but it was well attended. Just a reminder to the public that the Echo Center on the 23rd of March at 10 o'clock will be a senior abuse and fraud workshop, and all seniors and anybody or caretakers are invited to attend. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And where is it going to be?
At the Echo Center.
Thank you.
10 o'clock. Thank you.
And Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to just say thank you to the Bulldogs for giving us an up and down ride, and I actually got down in Nanaimo to cheer them on for one game. It didn't help them a lot, but I should have gone the night before and I could have taken credit. They won that one. But so hopefully next year we can have a team and get out and buy your season tickets. The group in town that are running the team are doing a good job, including Councillor Polson, and I think they need to be commended for that. And the other things that have been doing, we've had a lot of meetings with the McLean Mill Advisory Committee, and keeping that going, and now it's going to be morphing into other things. And one of the things the McLean Mill Advisory Committee did come up with a recommendation and was talked about actually last December, but not much since because it can't really start yet, is forming a support group called something like the Friends of McLean Mill that's able to go out and raise funds and do things to take the serious crime going down. Do things to take the burden off the taxpayer. And that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Do you want to move receipt of all councillors'
I move
reports?
that all these wonderful reports from these councillors be received.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Council. And under new business, we've one item, home occupation regulations. Council, just to give you a bit of background, we have a situation here in town, in our city, where we do have some businesses that operate out of commercial areas, and we also have the same businesses that operate out of homes. And I personally need some more information. Probably all of us do need a little bit more information about the situation that we have with respect to that. How are they treated? How is it? What's it like in other communities? What's the implications for the city of Port Alberni in terms of taxes, in terms of commercial tax, business licenses, and so on? So I can see that city planner is here, and he may be able to answer any questions that we have related to that. And we do have a suggested motion that we could consider.
So, City Planner, are you able to just expand on that a little bit more than the information I gave?
I can hit some of the top highlights about our home occupation guidelines to start with, and then we can kind of go from there at council's discretion. So we do allow home occupations in our single-family residential zones. There are regulations in our zoning bylaw about that. Some of the bigger ones is the home occupation must be completely in the dwelling unit. There's no warehousing or retail operations allowed out of it. You're allowed one non-resident employee. The home occupation must be by a permanent resident of the dwelling unit. There's a maximum of 430 square feet of area within the dwelling that's allowed to be used for the home occupation. And there's a very small sign that would be allowed 2 square feet. So, pretty small sign for the home occupation. And you're only allowed to receive one customer at any time on the property. So those are kind of the bigger points of what our home occupation regulations cover. I think another one of the questions is, are they taxed commercially? Kathy Rothwell got a bit of a brief explanation from BC Assessment that, actually they're the ones that would assign, the tax class. And home occupations, as best as I can read into them, are not charged a commercial tax rate. They're residential, mainly because, and BC Assessment could answer this easier, but mainly because they're still intended to be a very small portion of the house. It's still primarily to be your primary residential unit, and you are allowed to have a small home occupation out of there. Now, they do indicate that there are some challenges for them if they were to try and do that. It's hard for them to assess what the value of that small space would be, depending on the commercial use. They also do point out that all commercial properties in the province receive a $10,000 improvement exemption right off the get-go. So even if, I think what they're inferring there is even if they did do some commercial tax classification to a home occupation with that $10,000 deduction, it may not make a whole lot of difference. Anyway, that's just a little bit of information about what I have, and I'd be pleased to answer any further questions and take direction from council.
So then, in theory, let's just choose a business, but someone could set up a dance studio in their home as long as it wasn't over 450 square feet.
But they would only be able to have one customer at a time.
Okay, so give private dances?
Yes, they could. Yes, you're right. They could potentially do that, yes.
Okay, so then they could be essentially into competition with someone who would be in a commercial area of whatever size, also offering personal lessons, and we would be treating them differently than we'd be treating someone who had taken the time to set up a business in a commercial area. Would I be right?
I guess essentially, yes, but the big difference is, at a commercial operation, it's a scale thing. Home occupations, the whole intent of them is to allow small business to be a small portion of the house at a small scale. That's kind of the intent behind them. Mm-hmm. Now, council, through the bylaw, sets the rules and regulations around there. And if council has concerns about our current regulations, that would be something that we could examine to restrict further, if that's what council wanted. If they thought our regulations are too liberal or too open, and that's a concern, that's something that certainly the city could do.
And city planner, for me, I'm not knowledgeable enough at this point to know if I have concerns. I'd just like to be able to get more information. And so that's why we were looking at this particular,
Sure.
I was looking at this particular
Yep.
suggested motion.
And we could do some comparisons to other municipalities. Most municipalities allow home occupations with different rules and regulations around them.
That would be critical to do.
Councillor Minions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know a while ago we had a letter written to council with concern of some specific businesses that were operating out of their homes. And the person who wrote the letter actually wrote in, you know, this would not be acceptable in Nanaimo or Campbell River, and gave a couple other communities. And I looked up those other communities' bylaws, and they were absolutely identical to the one that we have. So I think that the restrictions that we have, I mean, it doesn't hurt to look into it, but there may be things that are more important for our staff to spend their time on, because from what I understand, and certainly what I looked up that day, they were identical word for word, how they were written on our sites, size of the home that they can use and that kind of thing. I know that there are home businesses that are operating out of their homes that are not following the guidelines, and that's a different story, but I think what our actual guidelines are very reasonable, and I think home businesses provide opportunities for people to run very small scale businesses as secondary incomes for their homes.
Okay. Councillor Sobe?
The only concern I have, and I'm seeing a growing number of this, I'm having this mechanic at his local mom and pop shop, and he's paying commercial property taxes for the service he's rendering. And I got the same one working out of his home, and he's paying just his residential property tax. You see, there's a balance that, or do they?
Well, I can tell you, for your example, a mechanic wouldn't get a home occupation license because A, they can't operate, you gotta be operating out of your house, you know, and, you know, I didn't cover all of our home occupation, but specifically prohibit activity or manufacturing, welding, vehicle or machinery repair or other light industrial uses. So I know I'm being particular, but that specific example wouldn't have been granted a home occupation.
So do you consider a garage being part of a dwelling house?
No.
Okay. So, Councillor McClement?
Mr. Mayor, aside from the fact when I saw the occupation regulations, I thought it was something to do with when you could occupy your house, but okay. I'll make this motion and we can get the report back. I think we could talk about it forever and see what it does include. Let's see what we got now and see if we want to do anything. So I'd move that staff be directed to prepare a report reviewing options for potential amendments to home occupation regulations. Now you can second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
Could I just, so I am getting to council what they're looking for, can I assume you want some comparisons to other municipalities?
Right.
And are you looking for possibility, do you just want those comparisons, or do you want suggestions about how to restrict things further? Or are you just wanting comparisons at this stage?
Well, from my perspective, Councillor McClement made the motion, but from my perspective, I'm looking to see those comparisons, and then we'll decide from there whether or not we want to go further.
Fair enough. I just wanted to be clear that I'm going to get council what they're looking for.
And that's my feeling also, to get a comparison.
Councillor Paulson?
And just maybe you could shed some light on enforcement and how many complaints and situations we've had in the last one. It doesn't have to be specific, but I'd like to know if this is a rampant problem or is it something that we can kind of deal with on a onesies and twosies basis sort of thing. So we can kind of get an idea of
some history about enforcement complaints about that? Sure.
Yep.
What I don't want is a situation where people who are investing in a commercial area and a commercial enterprise and all of the costs associated with that, feeling that somehow they're treated completely unfairly to competition that might be occurring in a residential neighborhood.
And certainly, you know, if we do receive a public complaint that someone is going beyond what those home occupation regulations allow, we would investigate and take corrective action if necessary.
Okay. Thank you, City Planner.
Okay.
Okay, this brings us to question periods, an opportunity for public and press to ask questions of the mayor and council. And seeing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Second.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and might even still be light outside, but I guess not.